Honestly, some of the facts that I usually find online do not make sense at all. Take, for example, this one. According to a couple of Seattle researchers, crows not only hold grudges, they tell their friends and family about them. And in my head, I'm like, did they tell you or something?
Get ready for the battle of the sexes.
I still think that some things on this internet are a lie, but just so you know, I also don't believe in this fact myself, and I honestly don't know how it is that people can read crow body language because birds mostly just move in roughly the same directions, they make mostly the same noise. So I don't know, like these researchers, they really need to tell us what exactly it is that they're smoking. But anyways, it's about time we start this podcast. Welcome to Break Time on West Side, your number one break time podcast, coming to you from Nairobi, Kenya. The man on the mic is none other than a man that is tall, dark, and mildly handsome. He's a man that has questioned scientists like these people that are busy talking about crows and holding grudges. And well, he just can't get satisfied with the internet. It is none other than I, Sir Denver B. The show is Battle of the Sexes, where we take a nice swing at both sides, looking at matters love, sex, and relationships, just so that we can pretty much reveal how absolutely out of sense most of this shit is. And in line with the discussion of things that are out of sense, now a certain government official, actually to be more specific, an Embu County Commissioner, Embu is a county in Kenya, happened to take a very interesting approach when it came to the issue of teenage pregnancies, and his recommendation was that men need to start dressing their wives in school uniform to avoid other men, including them themselves, preying on younger kids. And I know, like, that brought some sort of an uproar online, and I sort of do want to say that I kind of understand the slight bit of sense that he had, but I also do agree with everyone else's ability to sense that there's some nonsense in there. Now, let's be completely honest about one thing. This guy made a slightly sensible point. Keyword being slightly. Now, the thing with dressing them all up and sort of putting them in a situation where everyone is wearing uniform does make it such that, you don't want to touch a child, or at least you don't want to go up against a girl with school uniform in that situation, because you don't know if it's someone's wife and you might be screwing shit up. So maybe, just maybe, there might be an entire barrage of those people that do not want to go for people's wives and would much rather prefer minors, and you've confused them in a sense. So I can get the sense in that. But now here's why it starts becoming a little bit odd, because if you were to actually pay a bit of attention to the entire point, you'd realize that it's probably a little bit nonsensical. And unfortunately, I have to agree with everyone here, because if you dress grown-ups in uniform, it's not going to be the grown-ups that will manage to dilute the whole problem. It'll be the kids that'll suffer, because now if a grown person goes and say gets a young girl pregnant and she had uniform on when they met, he can just come out and say, I didn't know if she was underage or overage and I didn't feel like asking. And let's be honest, women, y'all never really want us to ask you your ages. Apparently it's a rude thing to do. Just the same way we don't want you to ask us how much we make. But here's the thing. When you look at it that way, it looks bad. What even makes it worse is the fact that if you decide to dress your wives like this, then it suddenly gives, marriage material and wife material an entirely different look. Because in this case, it means that, if I go and I see a girl in uniform, I'll be like, she looking like wife material right there. But anyways, that aside, I just wanted to bring that one out just so that I can sort of state my views on this, because I found it particularly interesting that someone would say such a thing and not measure the ramifications on both sides of the table. But anyways, that being said, it is time to get on to our discussion for today. Now, a couple of weeks ago, say maybe about 6-7 weeks ago, actually it was a little bit over a month to 2 months, back when we were busy recording the minisodes with Njuguna Macau, shout out to him, we sort of did this thing where between recordings where we were busy talking about some of our experiences. And it wasn't just me and him, there were a bunch of people in the studio, a bunch of other guys. And the story that had come up at some point was how at some level you kind of realize that the best sex that you got, like the best smash, the best bang you've had, has probably not been from the finest girl you've been with. And we sort of went back to back, gave each other stories and so on. And the main underlying statement was the finest babes usually gave some of the least likable to even the worst sex ever. And it was on the flip side where we're looking at the people who've given us some of the best sex ever, and we realized that the least attractive girls gave us some of the best sex we ever had. And that kind of got me thinking for quite a bit, so I didn't just leave it at that. I decided to go and do a little bit of my research. And I found something particularly interesting, because it's not just the bedroom where we talk about this shit. There's other lines where we can go and attribute this kind of thing, where you find that a lot of the super attractive people have underperformed and still gotten some level of accolades. And at that point, that was when it got me thinking about, if this is actually something that is a thing. And apparently there's supposedly a scientific study that actually looks into this, which was stating that the more attractive you are, the easier it is for you to get ahead in life, because, well, people like attractive people and people want to be associated with attractive people. So it brought about this phenomenon I'd like to call pretty privilege. And by all means, pretty privilege is not a bad thing. By all means, it's not a bad thing. I know over the past few months, maybe even year or so, people have made the term privilege sound like a bad thing. From white privilege to male privilege, it's been looked at as such a bad thing. And honestly, it isn't. I don't see anything wrong with having privilege. Privilege is just the pros of being in a certain situation at a certain time. It's some of the things that the quote-unquote regular person might not have. Although then again, you do think about it, when you look at the core of each and every person, we all have some level of privilege. We just don't want to acknowledge that. Or at least a lot of the so-called social justice warriors and feminists, as well as people who like to use the whole privilege card thing, don't really acknowledge that. But anyways, that being said, so I came to the conclusion that there is such a thing as pretty privilege. Now, pretty privilege is the advantages of being attractive and having things easier because you are attractive. And it seems like it's this, big lie, or it's just related to sex. And I'm not saying that if you're attractive, it means that you're absolutely pathetic in bed by default. It doesn't. It just means that there's a high likelihood that you are actually pathetic in bed. Now, to kind of prove it a little bit more, you look at the workplace. A lot of people have complained that so-and-so got a much higher position, so-and-so got a promotion, so-and-so is getting certain favors because they're attractive. As much as some women might complain that they go to work and there's always that workmate that's really trying to do the most for them and they don't like it, that same workmate is probably gonna start picking up the slack for them if they fail to do something. And they won't even have to ask, they'll pretty much just be like, you mind doing something for me? Hell, they might not even promise them shit and they'll still have that work done for them. That is an example of pretty privilege. And in as much as I know it sounds like it's something that I pulled out of my ass, and it's perfectly okay if you think that way, because that would clearly mean that I have some really good shit, pun intended, I will state that this is something that actually is a truth, because when you're more attractive, you aren't really expected to be that good at shit. Like, let's just be honest to ourselves about that. And, well, you might sort of pull the whole, I've looked at attractive people and I didn't give them that kind of privileged feeling, blah, blah, blah. I've had to work for everything because I'm attractive. And yes, that's probably true. But the thing is, you're not attractive to everyone, or at least not everyone is attractive to every single person. There's someone that's gonna find you ugly. There's someone that's not gonna see you as good of a person, or at least as attractive of a person as probably other people might think. But it is something that actually exists. And yes, it does sound like it's something that actually just starts from the bedroom. So in that case, you do have to kind of question the idea that maybe a lot of the good looking people that we do have, or at least a lot of the good looking people around us, might actually be pretty shit at a lot of things that they supposedly claim to be good at doing. Now, when you look at it, there's some sense in that, because since you want to be associated with attractive people, most people are willing to either look the other way or pretty much just give a slap on the wrist, or they'll just, want to take someone a lot easier because they're attractive, or they might look humble, or they pretty much just like the person. Like, let's not even lie, when a nigga's pussy whipped, everything that the shorty does, even though bad, will always be seen as, what, it's okay, we can work with that. And yet in actual truth, she's probably quite shit as a person, or she's just shit at whatever it is that she's supposed to be doing. And the reason why is just simple. We like the fact that they're attractive. Their attractiveness blinds us from their capability, or at least in this case, their incapability of doing the job, or, getting whatever it is that is meant to be done. And it's a huge problem for guys, it's a huge problem for girls as well. Apparently women also have the same issues, but it is actually easier for women to snap out of it and call it out like it is than it is for guys, because, well, as we all know, as guys, we're the more visual creatures. So with that being said, you might actually find that pretty privilege may not necessarily work on you, maybe because you might not be as conventionally or scientifically attractive as you might think, but it might actually have worked in your favor. Because, take for example, when y'all are at the club and you find one guy approaching your friend, and then the rest of the homies will come through, and it'll be this whole idea of y'all are busy hitting on each other, people are busy throwing vibes here and there. And the thing is, it's not because you and the whole crew are attractive, it's just that nigga wanted to highlight one of your pals, the super attractive one. And because he can't do all of that with just your pal, and he probably has backup, he'd be like, yo, if I'm gonna win, I might as well make sure the whole team win, or I might as well have the team sort of distract the possible problems, which is you girls, because y'all have a very good knack with cock blocking, and pull them out of the equation. And that's just a situation where the pretty privilege gets to work in your favor. Otherwise, my niggas probably wouldn't even have approached y'all, me included. So it is something that actually does happen. Also, you'll find that there are some people that might actually get promotions because, yes, they might be good, but they're not as good, or they probably even didn't put as much work because they were noticed from the get-go. And the whole idea of moving up is being noticed, and then sort of showing your desire or seeming worthy, and then being pulled up. But because you got into the organization and you were noticed by someone up top, and you put in a little bit of the work, then it'll be easier for you to get up. And I think that is part of the reason why one of the best compliments that guys can ever give a woman, or at least the nicest, most genuine compliment that you will get from a bunch of guys, is the whole statement of she's both beauty and brains. Because normally it's one of the two. You're either getting the beauty without the brains, or you're getting the brains without the beauty. Or if you're getting the beauty, then there's a lot less brain, or if you're getting the brain, there's a lot less beauty. Just saying. It is something that has occurred with so many people, and is part of the reason why there's a lot more people that will be willing to risk it all for a fine babe, while there's others that will keep quiet and never talk about the escapades because they weren't with a very fine babe in the first place. That's just it. It's something that happens. So let's just assume at some point that you want to find out if you have pretty privilege or not. And I'm guessing maybe some of you just might, because you might not know. Maybe this is something that might be hindering you from achieving your absolute best. Maybe you might not even be that attractive, but you think you're that attractive enough and you're getting pretty privileged. Then you probably should ask yourself a bunch of questions. Over the past few times that I've been with people, have I given my everything and gotten, or have I wowed someone so much that they are willing to call me back and have me over each and every time? At work, have I been putting in very little and receiving so much? Have people been doing favors for me with nothing in return? More specifically, people from the opposite gender. Like, it's just one of those things that you do kind of have to realize for yourself, because you might be having pretty privilege and it's holding you back, and there's so much more that you have to offer this world. Because when you look at people who aren't so attractive, you'll find that they have a much higher probability to be successful because they'll push harder. They've been in situations where they've had to push hard from the get-go. And this is mainly because they watched prettier, more attractive people get the stuff that they wanted, which made them have to push harder. It's because people didn't like them from the get-go and they expected them to go the whole stretch regardless of how they felt, because these guys at the top didn't necessarily find them attractive. It's actually something that happens. Take, for example, Diamond Platinums. Go and look at pictures of the nigga when he was broke. Like, I doubt the nigga actually got any action while he was still a broke guy. But nowadays he has money and he definitely looks a little bit better, at least from my sightseeing of it. And he's leaving kids with girls in literally every country of East Africa. Like, you just have to acknowledge the kind of work that the nigga had to put in for him to get to that level. And that's where I say pretty privilege has its cons. Yes, pretty privilege is a matter of pros, but there's the downside to having pretty privilege, which is the minute you move from a place where everyone saw you as attractive and you move on to another part of the world, or you move on to another environment where you're not as attractive, then it suddenly means that you're underperforming. It means that you'll have to start working hard, or at least you'll have to start working harder, because, well, these guys don't recognize you as the pretty that you are. And because you didn't know that you were having some level of pretty privilege, it's gonna be a little bit harder for you to move on. So maybe you should probably think about the whole idea for a bit before you go into it. Which is why I usually recommend a much simpler way to live. And this one is just led by one simple statement. When you're doing the work, make sure you do it as if you're ugly. You can always believe that you're beautiful, but always work at it like you're an ugly person. Because at the end of it, at least the results will speak better than your looks will. Because no matter how fine you are, if you give bad game in the bedroom, there's definitely gonna be someone who's gonna come out and say that you were shit. So you might as well do it like you have something to prove. You better go and do that shit. Put in your everything. Like you're an ugly person trying to make sure you validate the reason why you need to go back there, even though you don't intend on going back there. If it's the workplace, put that same amount of energy in it. Go and do the work like no one's gonna give you accolades for shit. Like the only way you can get it is through real grind. That's the only way that you can really start scaling up. And hell, if you are conventionally and scientifically attractive, then you might not just scale up, but you might scale up much faster than most other people will. Take a look at influencers on the IG and shit. When you take a pretty good look at the influencers on IG with a huge following, most of them are attractive. And you'll find that most of them actually did put the work in. And because they put the work in like they're ugly, then they end up reaping the benefits, and the attractiveness just happened to shoot those benefits up a little bit more. But anyways, I want to know what your thoughts are on this. Do you think pretty privilege is a thing? And do you think a lot of attractive people are very shitty in the bedroom? On the IG, if you want to hit us up, it is at Break Time on Westside. Slide into the DMs, drop your voice note, drop your message. We always reply. On Facebook, it is at Break Time on Westside. You can also go and leave a nice post or message there. And on Twitter, if you want to slide into my personal DMs, it is at Bagaka the D. I will catch you guys on the next break. Stay pretty.